Moving on to our next topic, which is thermal regulation or temperature regulation. This is what we are discussing, how a temperature is regulated in a body during a cold temperature and during a hot temperature. So how a body is able to recognize and how it is able to regulate our body temperature during a cold weather and during a hot weather. So what is the actually phenomena which is involved? Principal heat regulating center which is present in our body, it is hypothalamus, which is actually a portion of forebrain. This hypothalamus, it acts as a thermostat. What is thermostat? Thermostat is something which actually regulates, which lowers or increases the body temperature. So hypothalamus, it acts as a thermostat. What happens when the body temperature is cool? What is hypothalamus tend to do? It actually switches on the heat producing center so that the body temperature can be increased and we can feel some heat. Vice versa, if the body temperature is already overheated or it produces more heat, at that time hypothalamus, it switches off the heat producing processing area. So that heat processing area is switched off with the help of hypothalamus so that there can be less heat and it produces a cool temperature in the body. So this is how blood supply actually regulates the body temperature. This is a blood vessel. What happens whenever there is a cold weather? So whenever there is a cold weather, that means the outside temperature, outside the body, the temperature is quite low. At that time, these blood vessels, they tend to constrict themselves. Constrict means narrowing themselves. The radius of these blood vessels, it decreases. The blood vessels, they become constricted or they become narrow. When these blood vessels become constricted or narrow, what happens? The blood supply to these blood vessels will actually reduce. The blood supply will reduce. When this blood supply will reduce by convention, what happens? The loss of heat is also reduced. Similarly, the blood supply is reduced and the loss of heat is also reduced. When there is less heat loss, at that time it is a natural method so that we can conserve heat in a cold weather, so that there can be less loss of heat during a cold weather. So this is how this happens, and this phenomena is known as vasoconstriction. Vaso means vessel, constriction means narrowing or constriction, and this vasoconstriction is a process by which blood vessels tend to reduce the blood supply so that there can be less loss of heat, and less loss of heat means that there is a cooling, there is a heating effect, and that's why it is known to conserve heat during a cold weather when the outside temperature is cool. Now, in contrast, what happens when the temperature outside is hot? When we are exposed to a hot weather, what happens during that? During that time, the outside temperature, the temperature which is outside the body, it is quite high. At that temperature, there is overproduction of heat. And whenever there is overproduction of heat, our body tends to reduce this heat. So how can it reduce the heat? It will actually lose the heat through the dilation of these blood vessels. Now in this case, blood vessels get dilated. Dilated means that the radius or this complete radius of these blood vessels, they tend to increase so that blood vessels get dilated. Once these blood vessels get dilated, at that time blood supply to all these regions, this is a complete region where blood supply is increased as compared to this case. So blood vessels dilate. On dilation of blood vessels, the blood supply to these areas increases, and when blood supply increases, there is more loss of heat, and when there is more loss of heat, it produces a cooling effect. So this is phenomena when our body is exposed to a hot weather, hot temperature, and in this case we call it vasodilation. Vaso again means vessel, and dilation means the dilation of these blood vessels. That means the radius of these blood vessels increases. So this all vasodilation and vasoconstriction, it is the only phenomena which is known to regulate the temperature of a body whenever we are exposed to cold weather or if we are exposed to hot weather.